Hi friends, I'm Blue Mitchell, photographer, publisher, and now podcaster. You're listening to the Diffusion Tapes, a podcast where I chat with photographers, curators, and writers working in the field of fine art photography. More specifically, these tapes are conversations with people I've befriended on my journey as an artist and publisher. So now I get to learn a little more about these folks that I admire and respect, and I'm inviting you into our conversation. Welcome to the Diffusion Tapes. Well, here we are, folks, finally releasing our fourth Diffusion tape. In this tape, I had a sit-down with Katharine Jacobs while she was visiting Portland this past December. I met Katharine through some of our mutual friends here in Portland. I came to learn that Katharine and I are both alumni from the Oregon College of Art and Craft. Sadly, they will be closing down their degree programs next month, but that's another story. In our chat, Katharine fills me in on her photo history, shares some stories, her challenges, and evidently unpacks some photography baggage. Please listen in. So, here we are. I'm here with Katharine Jacobs, Katharine T. Jacobs, and we are in Portland, but Katharine actually has recently relocated. Where are you at now?
I'm in McCallamy Hill, California.
McCallamy here, which is where you grew up, right?
It's where I grew up. It's in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas, so it's about an hour and 15 minutes outside of Sacramento. But the population is arguable, but less than 650 people, so it's a little small.
It's a big change from being in Portland.
Totally,
you know? But
it's been nice. I've been staying really busy and going to Sacramento and San Jose a lot, so that's good. So.
Getting your city fixed?
Yeah, I'm looking at an MFA program in San Jose.
Oh,
so.
Okay. MFA, so are you going to do photography?
Yeah, I've been looking at like California State programs. I'm not really interested in, I want a full ride.
Oh, right.
So I'm looking for a graduate teaching fellowship, preferably at like a state school, just better funding. And yeah, and so I didn't realize, I like basically just looked up all the California state schools because I was thinking I'd go to like New Mexico or Arizona or somewhere in Oregon. But since I've been in California, I'm kind of like, I kind of like it here.
Yeah.
It's nice and my family's all here and it's good. So found out that San Jose State is like one of two of California State universities that offers a MFA specifically in photography. So it's Cal State Fullerton, which is like outside of LA, and then San Jose State. So I'm kind of into San Jose.
Nice.
There's palm trees and stuff.
So it would be a 2-year program?
It's a 3-year program.
3-year?
I just found out. Yeah. So I sat in and they had like a advancement to candidacy program. It was 4 MFA students in all different areas in their 5th semester. And they basically, so it was like a pre-thesis sort of thing. Like, here's our presentation. It was really cool to sit in on, and the faculty seems really engaged. I said a few things. I was joking with it. I was like on a date and the food was terrible, but I like had to tell the date. I was like, I don't ever tell a waitress that the food is terrible because she has no control over the situation.
Right.
It has nothing to do with her. So I just smile and I tip 20%, and that's how it's going to be if you want to keep going on dates with me. But then I was in this like panel discussion, this MFA program with a bunch of people I didn't know. And I'm like, but I do kind of tear people apart artistically.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just kind of noticed that about myself. And I've waited tables since I was like 15, but I've also done photography since I was 15. And I was telling a friend about that today, and she's like, well, art is something someone can change. You know, the way they make work and the way they talk about their work, that's something they can change. And so I've always loved a critique.
Well, also, I think people would all agree that some food is bad, whereas art is subjective, right?
Right.
I mean, some people love McDonald's and some people hate it, so I guess that's
true.
similar.
And some people love Jackson Pollock and some people hate it. So, you know, you can go either way probably. But I just feel like it's less really about what the work looks like and your ability to convince me that things are intentional and there for a reason. Right. So there was some art there that I was kind of, I don't know. I would think I was also trying to maybe make myself known to the department heads and stuff, but I was really kind of like, I just really felt in my element, and it was really fun.
Right,
and
yeah,
I really
that's your comfort zone.
It was just such a funny contradiction because I had just talked to this person about how it's like, I will never write a Yelp review. I will never complain to the waitress, but I will tear you apart artistically if you give me a second. So,
wow, that's interesting.
Not like to be cruel, but like,
no, but part of that's probably you as a student, but also as a teacher too.
Yeah, definitely. Right? Yeah. And I've told some people about that, like that I don't know if it's strict. I'm a little bit of a hard teacher. I hold people accountable and I push people. And so far it's been really a positive thing. But I was telling someone about it and they were kind of like, oh, wow, you really can't make people feel like their work isn't any good. And I'm like, you kind of can, actually. You can, because everyone has something to make work about. And work is really only bad when it's not coming from like a genuine place, I feel like. So that's how my approach to education is, helping my students access what they should be making work about and talking about that and really accessing a personal side of you, because I feel like everybody has a story to tell. And I feel like photography is a really great medium that's accessible to a lot of people. But once you learn how to visually tell a story, you can convey a lot, or you can process a lot, whether other people totally get it or not.
Right. I appreciate photography where you can see the passion of the artist in the work, which, and that could vary what that is, but knowing that it's important to them. Not just getting by, or I'm just doing this to do it, right? Right.
Yeah. I'm making this to like check the boxes or something. Yeah. So, yeah.
Did I use the rule of thirds?
Right. Which is totally, it's funny because photography is half science and half, it's a scientific process. So as an educator of photography, I feel like I get people that are really into the science element and the rules and the technique. And then it's also a very artistic medium. And so it's like you kind of, I don't know, I don't really feel like painting is the same way. I don't know. You may argue that maybe like ceramic or glass blowing is, because it's actually like
technical.
There's a technique, there's a skill set, and then you kind of learn the rules to break the rules sort of thing. But I've struggled a lot in teaching about whether or not I even want to talk about rule of thirds. And yeah, you need to know how to make a good exposure and stuff. I don't always agree with that rule of thirds layout.
Sure, yeah. Well, that's interesting. Let's back up then.
Okay.
I'm curious to hear how you got into photography then. Was it more from a technical side or artistic, or what drew you to it?
So I've always been like an artsy kid, I guess. Like always would draw pictures and everything. And when my parents separated, they like sent me to a counselor and she would just let me paint pictures and didn't even realize I was processing stuff. So just always kind of been into that, but I never really got any recognition. I like remember maybe I wasn't the best drawer, the best painter, and the best ceramic artist. So photography was actually the first time that I had a teacher in high school who was like, you're really good at this. You need to keep doing this. I like dropped out of calculus. So I was like, I'm going to take another photo class. Almost failed chemistry because sometimes I'm like, how am I a photographer? How am I in the darkroom all the time? How am I mixing chemicals? Because I borderline don't believe in chemistry. Like, how is that even a thing? So as a mother raising kids, it's like, you really just need to encourage someone, whether you necessarily think they're that great at it. So just that encouragement really enabled me to be like, wow, this is something I really enjoy doing. And then I went to art school. So I like convinced my family to kind of let me go. They were like, this is dumb. This is a lot of money. You're going to regret it. I was really adamant about being able to have access to lots of different media. Really wanted to do glass blowing and ceramics. So I went to California College of the Arts because it was basically the only school that really encompassed all of that.
Right.
And basically my first semester, I had this really amazing professor who her first name is Mariella, and I can't remember her last name, but she taught darkroom, and I was able to like skip the beginning class and go straight to a second year. Just based on experience in high school and stuff. Just fell in love with silver printing there. And then I was like, okay, photography is where I'm going to go. And she just had this way of teaching it that I feel like I teach in her similar style. You know, she's very engaged. She looks at your work. She tells you, okay, go to 3.5, add 3 seconds. You know, really just like can look at an image and tell you what needs to change. That's just something I've been perfecting just by, you know, hours and hours and hours of darkroom printing.
Right. I had a similar professor in college, too.
Did you?
Where, yeah, I ended up being her TA after my first year. We just got along so well.
Right.
But also she was real good about just looking at a print saying, this is what you need to do.
Right.
And then I just kind of mimicked her as a TA. I can do what she's doing.
What would she say?
What would she say? Yeah. And actually, she went out on maternity leave, and they didn't have anyone, like a substitute to fill in. So I was actually running the class for, probably wasn't that long, but it seemed like a lot of burden for a student.
Right. 12 weeks is maternity leave. Yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah,
a long time.
I think they got somebody in there, but I think at first I was doing all of it. But I took it as a compliment that they thought that I could handle it. Right?
Yeah. Where was that at?
It was Montana State.
Okay.
Bozeman, Montana. Yeah.
Okay.
That's where I started photography. I actually started in their film program.
Right.
And then photography was a requirement.
Okay.
And that was actually the first exposure I had to like darkroom photography.
No pun intended.
I do that all the time. Photo references.
Well, that makes sense about this, like your kind of audio component. For me, I'm like film. People are always like, oh, yeah, you do photography. Oh, you should do film. I'm like, I don't think that way. I don't think in moving pictures at all. Like,
yeah. I've always thought I'd get back into film at some point. Yeah. Maybe still.
You can.
Yeah, why not?
I'll allow it. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. But I think what I liked about photography was the immediacy and that I could do it alone. I didn't have to have a team of people, that I could just go produce work, be very productive and not have to depend on other people to do stuff.
Absolutely.
Which I was a bit of a loner in that way. Like I like groups, but it's hard for me to work in groups.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Even in my day job, I have trouble with that. Like, I like working alone.
Totally. Yeah. No, I was like a swimmer, which is like a totally solitary sport.
Right. Not necessarily a team sport.
Totally. Yeah. I was just telling a friend about glass blowing. They were like, oh, have you done glass blowing? I'm like, yeah, but you really have to like rely on like other people to help you, which I mean, probably a glass blower listening to this is going to be like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. But in my experience, it was like you kind of depend on someone to help you like actually blow, help you catch the piece and all this stuff. And I was just like, I can't handle that stress to be the person that someone else relies on, and I don't want to have to require someone else to be present for me to make my work, which is kind of funny because I use a lot of models, but we talked about self-portraits like a minute ago. You can take a picture of whatever's in front of you if you feel that compulsion, I guess.
Yeah, compulsion, the immediate like, gratification of being able to make a picture.
Totally. Yeah.
That's true. So you got into doing 4x5, large format photography. Did that start in college? Or?
Yeah, that happened at CCA. So Chris Johnson is this, I think he's still teaching there, but he taught like a lighting 4x5 class. Okay. So it was all about studio lighting, and it was all done 4x5 film, color or black and white. So it was really tedious. Prior to that, I think I had done it was like a zone system, but it was all like 35 millimeter or medium format class. It was it was a mural printing class where they also tried to teach the zone system, which I was super into mural printing, but I was like, how the heck am I going to learn the zone system on 35 millimeter? I just don't believe in that. And so then I took that 4x5 class. Here is what they're talking about. Here's a single image, and here's how you can change it with these variables, you know? And so I just learned a lot that way. I didn't do very good in the studio lighting. In hindsight, I'm like, wow, I really should have applied myself in that class. But I was like 19 and, you know, but I would check out a 4x5 a lot, and I would take it down to Santa Cruz to visit a friend who was going to UC Santa Cruz and just take pictures on the beach and stuff. And we actually went to this nude beach because I was working on like a project. And so I was doing tests with Polaroid, and this guy, a totally naked guy on the nude beach, was like, "Hi, this camera is so cool. What are you doing? Would you take my portrait?" I was like, "Yeah, I guess." And so I just took a Polaroid shot of him, and he was like so thrilled to just like have his photograph taken with that camera. That was something that I never had. No one cares if you take their picture with a 35 millimeter, or digital. Like,
Sure.
people are so used to that. So that whole process was really amazing. And he like took the Polaroid, he's totally naked from like the knees up, and he was like, "I'm going to give this to my mom." I was like, "Okay." Whatever you want to do. So it was just like this really surreal experience, but it was like, wow, people want this. Like, people want their portrait taken. And I think I like didn't have the confidence that like, oh wow, people want their portrait taken by me. But I was very able to be like, well, people want their portrait taken by this camera.
Right.
And so I started taking portraits of people whenever I could with that camera, and that's kind of evolved into other projects.
Approach strangers, or were you doing friends?
Yeah, so that happened probably around the time that I decided to move to Portland. So I moved to Portland. I found Blue Moon camera right away. I bought a $300 4x5 and just was taking pictures. I went to PCC and like took a darkroom class there because I just wanted access to a darkroom.
Right.
And I was like, I don't think I'm going back to art school. I don't know what I'm doing. And would just take pictures and would buy Type 55, which was like a positive negative Polaroid film, and just take portraits of friends. I just remember going to camping trips and like busting it out, and my, just taking it kind of like almost like a photo booth kind of vibe. And then I started going to Oregon College of Art and Craft, and I kind of just kept up that practice of taking portraits. And then Polaroid announced that they were discontinuing, and I was like, had this dream of like doing this portrait project across the country. And so when they announced they were discontinuing, I was like, talked to my really good friend Ursula Barton and was like, I don't know what to do. I'm so bummed we won't get to do this trip. And she's like, let's just do it. And so they announced it in April, and we were on the road by June.
So was that the American Strangers? Okay.
Yeah. So those are all, not everyone there is a complete stranger, but people that we stayed with or met, or like word of mouth. Someone was like, oh yeah, go stay with my friend. But mostly it was people that we like saw on the street. And yeah, so it was all with Type 55. So I kept the negative and gave everyone the positive.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I noticed in that series you have such a gamut of styles of people in the photos, and then some mostly clothed, but I noticed that one was nude. I was curious if you found him like that, or if he decided. Or is that a woman?
There's one woman who's nude, and she was actually
That's what I'm thinking of.
My college roommate, and so we were on her prop. She like lived out in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
I think I had taken nudes of her back in college, so I think she was like, let's just like kind of redo that.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen her since then. We also went to the Rainbow Festival, and there were people just naked there.
Right,
so there's a couple nudes.
Well, that stood out because I was like, if these are strangers, this one person was nude.
Yeah.
Versus all these other ones that aren't.
Right. So she was, she was someone I knew. I hadn't seen in years, and we stayed with her there. Right. So that one, maybe it's a cheat. Maybe I can't have that one. So.
Or she's just strange.
Well, yeah, I haven't seen her since. Now we're definitely strangers.
Right.
But yeah, and she was kind of strange. Yeah. No.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, have you tried that new Type 55?
No, I'm over it.
Yeah, done with that. So you shooting all this film now?
Yeah, just sheet film now. Sure. I don't know. I probably took thousands, of pictures with Type 55. I think it's cool. Go for it. I don't need that anymore, though. Yeah.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Yeah. I know. I have my ex-husband bought me some Type 55 for Christmas a few years ago and was like really excited to give it to me. And I was kind of like, I don't want this.
like thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, it was kind of like an old sock or something. Like, ooh, no, this is.
And then interesting, you've evolved beyond it. Like you've kind of done that,
right? And I don't mind seeing it. It's a very identifiable look, style. But and sometimes I see people that are using it, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's beautiful. But I have no need for that in my work currently.
Sure. So you shot I don't know the sequence of things, but it's called Stepmotherhood series. Was that film?
That's all film.
That's all
yeah,
film.
that started.
Did that come after the other series?
Yeah, so American Strangers was we left in 2008, June 2008, and it was 6 months to do the lower 48, and we got back in December. And then later in 2009, we drove to Alaska in July. That took a month, and then didn't make it to Hawaii until 2010, right before I got my BFA. Okay. So, and that was my thesis project at Oregon College of Art and Craft. And then, when you graduate from college and you're like, fuck.
Now what?
Life. Yeah. And I remember those months, right when I was wrapping everything up. I was really hoping that American Strangers project would take off or something.
Oh,
right. It was just
right.
A lot of the feedback I got from it was wow, this is a real grand project for your undergraduate work. And I was there's no way this can't
the fact that you traveled and
yeah.
That's you're committed.
I made, with the help of my friend Nick Musso, I made 50 wooden boxes. So it was like an installation that you could open up these shadow boxes that all had the photos. It was just very much I don't know. I could have easily just hung up 50 pictures. That project was so much about getting from place to place. The portraits only told half the story, I felt
Yeah.
So, then I graduated from college, and I just remember that crash. By October, after you graduate, I was just I don't know how you make money doing this. That's the thing about art school. They don't really teach you how to run your own business or, so it's just not something that I was ever taught.
I had a very similar experience when I had that high of, it took me a while to get through school. So I'd gone to several schools, and finally when I went to the Oregon College of Art and Craft, and I went there for 3 years actually. And then
for your undergrad? Okay. Yeah.
I was older than most of the people when I graduated. Yeah. Actually, no, that college had pretty diverse.
It does. I was actually really young. I was 19 when I started there, so I was one of the younger.
We were always shocked when there was a 19-year-old. It's oh my god,
yeah.
We're so young.
How'd you figure this out?
Yeah, exactly. Took me a long time to get there, but but I had that high when it. Right around graduating and finishing thesis. Oh my god, I finally got through college. It wasn't just I'm finishing college. I finally got through college. It's a whole different experience. But then the summer was great because I worked at the camps at OCAC with the kids and taught photo and with high schoolers, and that was great. And then getting into the fall after that was major crash because I didn't know how to make money doing this stuff.
Right.
And I didn't have a job, and I started doing more commercial work. I was shooting architecture, interiors, exteriors, and actually tried to do a couple weddings, and that was a huge mistake.
Well, you were probably making all that stuff. I mean, I just know what I was taught in art school was not actual, most of it was not technical photography, no skill-based photography, no hireable no employable skills.
Right.
It was
I had to teach myself. Yeah. I had a 35 millimeter camera, and I'm trying to shoot architecture. So I had to get that tilt shift lens for it so I could actually make it work correctly.
Right.
Which I should have just had a large format camera or something, but
yeah.
I've always been a photographer for a long time, but I've always been intimidated by large format. And I'm not very good at it either.
Interesting. So you have done it, but you...
Yeah, I've done it. Yeah. I have that feeling when I see someone shooting large format in the wild, if I'm out in the wild and I see someone, I just freak out. I'm oh my God, I got to go talk to them.
Like a celebrity or something?
Yeah. And it's about the camera, like you were saying. The camera is the celebrity, not necessarily the person, but the camera.
Doesn't really matter who's operating it.
I got to go look at that camera.
Yeah. So... that's the funny thing about large format is people are well, you start at 4x5, you can go to 8x10. And some people are really all about the size. And I'm I'm not really a size queen in that way, but it's
size doesn't matter.
Yeah, but the 4x5, I'm this is large format, but it's manageable. And I took a rail camera to all 50 states. It wasn't easy. It was limiting. So me imagining doing that with 8x10, or even had some friends that made 16x20 cameras, or, I was just I'm not interested in going any bigger. And I really like being in the darkroom, and 4x5 is really kind of in between. Right. But large format for me was when I take portraits like digitally or commercially, like for commercial work, I go way too fast. I make a lot more mistakes because I'm so used to taking 4x5. The reason that I still shoot that way and I still make my portraits that way is because I feel like because of the time that it takes, that space between when you start composing the photo and when you actually take the photo, the person who's modeling for you has completely dissolved all anxiety. Or like whenever anyone tries to take my picture, I feel like I make the worst face and I hate every picture of myself. But if someone gave me the space to sort of just settle, then I can be my authentic self.
Sure.
So that's why I still shoot 4x5 and continue to make projects, portrait-based projects with large format.
Yeah, well, I've always appreciated that because I feel like what you're creating is not just a photograph, but you're creating an experience. So it's that moment of you and the model or whoever who's sitting for you.
Right.
Have that sort of bond in that moment.
Totally.
And I think, well, I know from your work, it shows through models. Not everybody is that way, but my favorite work is the stuff you can see that change in whoever it is. It could be a friend,
Right.
could be a model, whatever the case may be. But there's definitely a little bit more of an intimacy there. And it's almost like an echo of the moment, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's more of an exchange, I guess. It's like, I don't know if I necessarily love the word collaboration. I know a lot of models that are like, it's a collaboration. And it's like, well, it is, but I don't know, you kind of peel away the first skin of the onion or something and are able to see, I don't know, we all put up those barriers. And photography is a really vulnerable thing to model for, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I've done a
sure.
lot of modeling for friends, and I don't know. That's one thing people ask a lot. They're like, how do you get people to like take off their clothes for you? Because I take off my clothes for people too. Like, I don't know. You just kind of got to reciprocate.
Right. Yeah.
Or take off my clothes for myself. You have to put yourself in that situation to be able to ask someone to put themselves there.
Yeah, for sure. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of leads into your newer work, which I think is I guess you could call it art therapy.
Yeah.
So your new work is called Heavy Handed. What I'm noticing in the progression of the work, and we'll backtrack in a second, but I'm noticing where we were talking about that, the intimacy with the sitter. And I'm seeing some of this new work of yours. It feels like it's evolving, and it's not just about what you're going through in your life, but also there's this kind of drama that I'm seeing in the work that I feel there's a bit of intimacy that's creeping in that I don't know how that is part of your vision, but I'm really appreciating. I'm thinking of one image in particular of a male model, and there's a sheet or something, and then hands coming around the sheet. I find that image to be one of the most striking of yours that I've seen, and I think it's relatively new. It says so much more than what I think your initial goal was. So I just wanted to say that I'm appreciating how, even though you have a specific focus, that it's becoming more universal, and it feels like it's opening up the way you're shooting and how you're addressing it.
That's great.
So can you tell us more about Heavy Handed and how that came about?
Yeah. So in September 2017, I started just having numbness in my legs and up my body, and turned into like a whole cuff of my body. Saw a bunch of doctors and got a bunch of blood work done, and MRIs, they thought I maybe had like a bulging disc in my spine, and then those MRI orders got turned into brain MRI orders. So I was basically, over the course of like 3 months of, more than that, almost 6 months of different doctors and neurologists.
This is after you had your child.
Yeah,
right?
I was 7 months postpartum from my daughter. Yeah, so she was still a little baby, and that was hard. Like getting an MRI, you can't nurse if you are going to get the dye.
Oh,
so
right.
it was like, it was a pretty rough time to go and sort through all that. So I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And so all during that time, from that September, when I first started to experience numbness, I was working with Lyceum Portland. And so we were teaching classes and working with students. And working with a model basically once a month minimum. I was just constantly having access to models, and I was really trying to work through what I was going through. So as much as that work is about my diagnosis and my learning that I have a disability and I'm going to live with multiple sclerosis for the rest of my life, and I need to be on medication, and, just a lot of things, like probably won't ever have any more children, all these things that I'm like facing, that work is really, maybe feels like it's evolved because it literally was like being made through all of that.
At the same time, you're discovering this about yourself.
So it was like some of those early images, I don't know. I'm just making a portrait about the fear and the confusion or the literal sensation that I feel in my body. Like, why are my hands numb? And so like they really started like being really hand oriented. And then at the same time, subconsciously, I really wanted to make work with multiple hands. So my hands have been numb for a year. They're just chronically kind of like pins and needles feeling. I still have a lot of strength and like I'm super lucky actually. I can like use them and that they're both the same amount of numbness. For a while, one was numb and one wasn't. That was really hard to cut an onion. It was like really scary. So I thought I was making work about sort of hands and agility and ability and disability, all of that. And at the same time, my marriage was definitely dissolving, kind of not something I knew was really going on. But so I started working with couples or like people wanted multiple models because in that image that you're talking about. So that's a couple,
right.
2 men and one's a dancer, and they are both just so very, I mean, that was definitely felt like collaborative because they are just so really wanting to participate with each other and with me and make something beautiful. So I was really drawn to that and like felt like I had a click. Like I really want to work with couples or friends or people that are able to touch each other because we just made better images that way. Right. And then like when my marriage, like finally, like when all this stuff kind of happened, I found out a bunch of kind of terrible stuff and infidelity and all of these things. I was like, oh my God, I've been making work about intimacy. Right. I haven't even really, maybe this work isn't even about my disability. This work is about love and loss and feeling disconnected, And so like now that I'm totally out of that situation, I'm like, oh, like I see that work so differently.
I was curious. That's why I brought it up. Cause it seemed like there was something else happening there.
Yeah. That honestly, like if you had asked me 5 months ago, I would have been like, no, this is about this.
Right,
so
right.
Now I look at it and I'm like, oh no, that's so different. So
that's what's nice about art therapy, though.
Isn't it crazy? Which feels silly when you like, well, subconsciously I was doing this, like you're like, if you're not making work with intention, then it doesn't count. And it's like, no, your brain knows a lot more,
Oh yeah, for sure.
So it's that actually.
You were making it with intention, you just weren't conscious of it. Right.
And like, that whole dissolving of that relationship as well as really literally being able to hold things in my hand that I've made while processing has taught me a lot about trusting my intuition. Because it's just so clear to me now that you knew stuff before you knew it.
Right,
I don't know.
Yeah.
So
you were making it.
I was making it on paper, or like on film. Here's a negative of it.
Right,
so where I'm located now, I don't have access to the models and the friends and all that stuff. So I'm probably going to go in a more self-portrait direction right now, just because that's what I've got.
Right. But, you don't have that big network you had in Portland.
I had a really big, great network in Portland, and it's totally something that was really a hard decision to leave, but it's also something I know I can always tap back into, or a lot of the models that I've worked with too are traveling models, and my friends have been really great and moved, drove me down and built me a dark room, and like I've got a good. So I'm so grateful for Portland and the amazing photo community that's here, but I don't need it in the same way. I don't need someone to hold my hand in the same way where I maybe needed a few years ago.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, I've always been scared of leaving Portland for that reason, like leaving that network of people. And then I realized, like, well, those people, my network it's kind of infinite. So you don't have to be about location necessarily.
Totally. And like with the internet and Instagram, everything, I'm like...
You stay connected with people.
Right. This isn't even...
Still work with them and do podcasts when you come to
Right.
town.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Totally. Yeah.
Do you feel that heavy-handed is that going to continue in the way it is? You said you're going to do self-portraits, or will it be something new for you?
So heavy-handed, kind of started as these silver prints, and then, the more research and the more I learned about multiple sclerosis, the more I realized that it really couldn't be in silver. And some of the images I feel like are a little bit hard to experience in such a literal black and white clean print. So I started doing cyanotypes and just hand coding and like really connected to that like visceral kind of quality and drippiness that I was getting by hand painting watercolor paper or fabric. And I still really want to do weavings and then like cyanotype print on them and then kind of destroy them. I don't know. I don't know. You know, those things you're like, I have these ideas, and then you say them out loud and you're like, don't tell anyone about that. You need to see it before you can tell anyone about it. So I have a lot of things I want to do, and I got really comfortable with cyanotypes, and I think that it's actually, I don't love the color blue, but no offense to your name, but no. You know, it gets kind of hard. It gets repetitive. And I love silver gelatin, and I'm super passionate about printing and printing well and making quality work. So it's been a really great removal. So multiple sclerosis, sometimes it has a direct correlation to vitamin D deficiency. So that was really important for me to use this like UV printing process and really like be in the sun. And so now that I'm in California, I feel less like I need to like absorb the sun all the time. But I still feel like there's a place for me to work with cyanotypes, but I've started making more silver prints now at my darkroom in California. And so I might have a project that's more based on the intimacy side of how that project evolved. That probably isn't called heavy-handed.
Sure.
And I think I'm going to have a solo show here in Portland where I'm a little bit more drawn to printing that work. So, but you know how photography is. It's kind of hard. I work so much with nudity. Sometimes it can be really difficult for me to find like a venue or an avenue to show it, or even on the internet, like constantly getting stuff taken down, even when I think I've edited it, like censored it enough. So
sad.
Yeah. So I'm really just kind of focusing on figuring out how to write about the work that I've already made, but also feel compelled to make new stuff.
Is that the hard part, the writing about it? It is a pretty personal thing right now.
Yeah. You know, Instagram's a really good forum for me because I can either write nothing or write 6 paragraphs, you know? And I get responses a lot from people that they really appreciate the writing. And I feel like if I do writing, I get a lot more likes or whatever, you know?
Right.
I feel like I like to write about my work. And that's when I teach, I always incorporate an artist statement because even if it's more about being able to have an elevator speech about what your work's about.
Right.
Because if you can't give me 3 sentences about why you make it and what it means and why I should give a shit, then maybe you shouldn't make it. I don't know. So no, the writing about it isn't hard for me, but it's a little more formal when I'm thinking about like master's programs and stuff like that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So writing about it.
Next steps. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can talk about myself, but I can't sell myself, I guess. That's the difference. So I'm not a businesswoman.
But you are. So all you have to do is be able to write about it.
Right.
And that'll sell itself.
Right.
I think that's all that matters.
I'm very pro learning how to talk about yourself, but I'm really bad at like pricing. You know, if I find out someone likes my work, I'm kind of like, oh my God, take it. Like, please have it. It needs a home.
I'm glad you like it.
Yeah. It's been homeless this whole time. It needs you. So.
Well, I think we could all take pricing classes.
Yes.
You did a whole motherhood project, but it was really about being a stepmother. So what about being a mother now?
Right.
I mean, how does that play into things?
So the stepmotherhood project, you started to ask me about that. It was in 2015. And at that point, I had been with my now ex-husband. We had just been dating since 2010. And so when I met him, my stepdaughter was the age that my daughter Paloma is now. So under 2.
Sure.
You know, I taught her how to read and potty trained her and, you know, was super involved. We had 50-50 custody, you know, saw her all the time and really felt this connection to her, but we didn't have like I didn't have a word. So my parents divorced when I was 8 and never remarried. So I had no concept of what step step-parenting was. So I started doing that stepmotherhood project because I was really just trying to discover what a step-parent was, what a stepmother was, what that role meant. So I photographed stepmothers and their stepchildren. So no bio children and no partners. And with 4x5. So it was very like, formal. I started in color film, and then I got the Regional Arts and Culture Council grant to continue that project just based on the funding. I was like, if I really want to, get the amount of families I want to get, I should do black and white. It was just more accessible. And found like a lot of families on Craigslist. I made this ad that was like female photographer in search of stepmothers and their stepchildren. It's very similar to the American Stranger project in the way that it was like, sight unseen, people unseen. I'm going to go and take their portrait. And it was really informative for me because I met a lot of different families with a lot of different issues and a lot of different experiences. And I witnessed a lot of love and a lot of compassion because mostly the people that want their portrait taken have a pretty good relationship. So that proved to be a little bit difficult for me because I wanted a little bit more. I wasn't trying to just be like, oh, look at stepmothers.
Yeah, you wanted the full gamut of the experience.
Yeah. I wasn't really trying to make a project that was like, look at us, we're heroes, But it was like, that project didn't land in the way I needed it to. It's just like a thing that happened with American Strangers too. I just didn't ever feel like people got it or like it had the impact I needed it to. You don't resonate with that unless you've gone through it or have a stepmother or whatever. So,
well, also, like you said, you're only representing half the story too.
Exactly.
I guess the other technique would be to get writing from people because they're not going to have the pictures if people aren't getting along, right?
Totally.
So
yeah,
it's hard I've run into that as a photographer. Is I have these great ideas, but I have a really hard time translating it into actual photographs.
Right.
Like, how do you do that?
Right.
How do you tell that story? And a lot of times I think people that can write can do it in writing, but how do you do that as a photographer and with writing? I mean, I guess you can make a book or something, but it's a challenge, I think.
And that's everyone's advice is like, I'm like, oh, I'm having a hard time with this project landing. And they're like, oh, make a book. I'm like, I don't want to make a book. I want people to just get it,
Right.
But not everyone that looks at pictures reads your artist
So we need
either.
to be like super rich and then pay those people
goals,
a bunch of money to stand next to each other, even though they don't like each other.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. We hate each other. Take our picture, which I just was hoping that would organically happen, and it never really did. So to answer your question, I use photography a lot. And like going back to that art therapy thing is like when I'm going through something, I do a project. I make work about it. Whether I always know what I'm making at the time isn't always the answer. So the stepmother project kind of just organically happened as this way for me to process my relationship with my stepdaughter. And I don't feel the need to do that with my baby right now. I mean, she's not even 2. So I did some, like 35 millimeter of her in the house when she was 8 months old. And I think about photographing her, but she's not at the age yet. I don't know. I thought about how if I'll take some pictures of her. I'm taking my stepdaughter down for Christmas and thought how I want to take some portraits of her. And that's the problem with 4x5 now is I feel like it's not a real picture unless it's 4x5.
Oh, right.
Like,
yeah. You have a little baggage, Katharine.
I know. I know.
Photographer baggage.
What is the title of this episode? Is it like Katharine and her baggage? Yeah. I found this tumbleweed on the side of the road. Wanted to do like some like Carrie Mae Weems sort of kitchen table series, but like me and this tumbleweed, we were in a relationship or something. Nice. And I was like, wow, that'd be really hard to do with 4x5. Maybe you should just do it digitally and just have fun with it. But I would never. Like, I can't.
It just doesn't feel the same.
I haven't brought myself to do that yet, even though I know people don't know the difference, can't tell the difference.
Well, depends on who you talk to.
Right. I mean, we can. But I
think that you're right, though, the general public.
Right.
It doesn't matter necessarily.
But also that might be a really lame project, so maybe don't.
Well, you never know. Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
If you're not passionate about it, right,
exactly.
then it's not going to translate.
Exactly. I'm pretty into this tumbleweed I found, but I don't know if
you'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'll figure it out. So I know I will get to a point where I photograph my daughter, my biological daughter, and I'll probably always photograph my stepdaughter, but I'm not really going through my baggage is not with my daughter at this point. So that's where Instagram's funny too, is it's like I take pictures of her every day with my phone. So that's funny. Like they don't feel like real pictures. They don't feel like art. I'm still documenting her daily. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I was curious because I hadn't seen anything. I have a similar struggle with my kids. There's a lot of my favorite photographers, they shoot their own kids and they do amazing work. And I'm always like, how come I don't do that? And I do document my kids all the time.
Right.
And I find different ways to do it. I've been taking Polaroids lately of the kids, and those have become way more precious to me than any other photo I've shot of them. So I'm realizing that maybe it's because it's too accessible. It's this, it's a phone or it's a digital camera. And then when I'm taking these Polaroids, these are one of a kinds. And for some reason, it has this timelessness. It captures them in this moment way differently than any other camera that I've used with the kids. So I'm realizing, okay, it has something to do with the equipment and the type of photo that I'm doing. What I like about it is they're just snapshots, literal Polaroid snapshots of them doing whatever they're doing. They have this immediate history to them, an immediate object, that I don't have with any of my other photographs.
There's something about that forcible print, because you can make a negative, you don't ever have to show anybody, like, even though it is more of a tangible thing and it's more of a process. And I do think that there's more intention with film photography a lot of the time. But I was thinking about that too. Just a friend gifted me a Polaroid camera, but it's the digital. It's not Polaroid. It's the Instax or whatever. So you can choose to print. And I find myself being like, that doesn't count in the like
it's not the same.
I just find myself,
You're still curating your shots.
Totally. Right? Yeah. Or I mean, yeah, with a Polaroid that you're like, this is going to be printed. I'm going to have to face the reality of this. Makes it more real. I think it makes you take better photos. I think it makes you more connected to the image, even if it's like an image. Like if you took that digitally, you might be like, I'll never look at that again.
Right.
But because it's like become this object.
Right.
I know.
When it happens in the moment too. It's a totally different experience.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I've actually I had this leather photo book that my mother-in-law gave me years ago. It's just been sitting in my darkroom forever. And I realized, hey, I can put my Polaroids in it. Now it has purpose. And suddenly it's like, oh, I have a precious object. If there's ever a fire in my house, I'm grabbing that.
Right. Right. You're like, wedding album? Nah, this. Yeah.
Right. Polaroids of my kids. So yeah, that's what's going with me.
I have Polaroids tucked into like every frame photo around the house. Like just kind of like tucked into the corner. I'm like, you're not precious enough to frame, but you're something that's important enough to have around.
Right,
and that's beautiful too. I don't know. That was the cool thing about Type 55 and that trip. It was like, I don't actually care about the positive, but the person was like so excited by it,
yeah.
Well,
it's nice because you could share it, right?
Totally.
And immediately you get this and I get this.
It all goes back to probably my own insecurity. Like, no one cares if I take their photo, but they care if this camera takes their photo. Nobody wants to model for you unless they get something out of it. That was my baggage going into that project. But it was really great to feel like there was a trade, because so many of those people I never would ever speak to again,
right?
Or ever have any contact with. I felt like I couldn't just take something from them. Photography is soul sucking from the subject, literally.
Yeah. At least they get to keep some of it.
Yeah, exactly. Here's your soul back. Since
you shoot a lot of nudes, you kind of talked about how that has its drawbacks. You and I had a artist talk last April on the same day. And one of the things I was talking about in my artist talk, and I realized I might have offended our friend Ray Bittigan, who shoots nudes, because I said, I don't want to be that guy that just shoots nudes. But my point was, if you're going to shoot nudes, you need to do them well. Right. And you need to have, a good intention behind it. And Ray Bittigan, of all people,
he does both of those. He does it well.
Yeah.
He's the master. Like, you're like, if you have a question about anything, call Ray. Also does everything with respect and love and struggles,
and you can see it in the images. So that's the thing for me, is like, can you see the difference in the images? I have an old book that's all female photographers that shot nudes, but you can tell in that book there's definitely a different feeling. to then comparing it to some of the more famous men that shoot
Right.
female nudes. There's definitely this aesthetic difference.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes I feel like that has a lot to do with what you were talking about earlier, about setting the model at ease and giving them time to kind of like get rid of that edginess that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas they're just posing and being treated more like gays.
Right. Yeah. Well, a lot of models that I work with are also, there's like Suicide Girls or pinup, and there's just a different aesthetic, or there's a lot of that want you to crouch on all fours and stick out your butt. And, so it's like when they realize, A, what I'm even asking them to do, B, what about the nudity is even significant.
Right.
That's something that me and a lot of Ray Bittigan included people just struggle with. That why do we care about the nudity? For me, I think it's a level of intimacy, vulnerability, humanity. I think you kind of touched on it a little bit. There's a fine line between like theatrics and art. I don't want the work to be too theatrical. So like some models are really into like costumes and makeup and stuff.
Right.
And I don't necessarily want that. I want like a very realistic portrayal of like who you are as a human being. And so the nudity is never about sex. It's not
Right.
sexual. And that is something that I've heard a lot from a lot of people, a lot of viewers, a lot of people that aren't photographers that see my work and are kind of like, oh, she does nudes. Cool. Oh, these are different. These just feel different.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different techniques you can do. Body hair is really helpful because it takes away that sort of pornographic element of it.
Sure.
But I do struggle with that. Like some people just find out you do nudity, and like my aunt joked at a holiday party that I do softcore porn, and it was like, that's not funny to me. But like I don't think that nudity is pornographic, and that's actually
Right.
like a pretty big soapbox that I stand on daily and fight against on Instagram and social media. And after having a child and breastfeeding in public, it's just like, I just don't feel that way. I don't feel like nudity is always sexual. And I don't feel like nude photographs are porn.
Right. Yeah. Well, Katharine, I'm really happy that you came to visit Portland so we could do this. My intention with these podcasts is to do all of them in person. So I'm really glad you came back to town. Because you were on my top 10 list of Portlanders.
How
since
flattering.
I don't travel that much.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy that you were able to come into town.
Me too. It's an honor. It's great. Excited. Thank you for doing this. And I'm excited to hear all your other interviews with
Yeah, me too.
the other top 10, Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Awesome.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Blue. Okay.
Okay, thank you for checking out the Diffusion Tapes. I don't have much to say for afternotes on this one. We kind of covered everything in the conversation. I will note, though, that it was a fun and fluid conversation, and I enjoyed getting to hear Katharine's story. We all have stories, good and bad. But I do enjoy discovering what makes people tick, and then how they pour that into their art. And on another side note, I'll be reviewing portfolios, recording some podcast sessions, and generally having a good time later this month at Photo Lucida. I'm looking forward to seeing some of our listeners there, so I'll see you then. In my next tape, we'll be talking all kinds of trash with Ray Bittigan.
Because I'm sort of paying for the house, so it's not an additional expense. And it just feels like home and a place for me to make my work.
Well, and access is nice. Being able to, I don't have to go across town or something. You just go downstairs.
You don't even have to be dressed.
Right. Exactly.